Grief. Good grief, bad grief, in between grief. What is grief? From my experience, grief is love. If you don't have love, then you're not going to experience grief. Grief is about losing love, but there's something deceiving about that concept of it. You lose the presence of the person that you love, but the love itself, is it gone? Does that leave too? Maybe in an active sense, they can't actively love you anymore, but that doesn't mean the love is gone. You know what I mean? There's a lot of ways that people handle grief, and I think that probably the most common in our culture, at least, is to stuff it, ignore it, get rid of it, get over it, supposedly. How's that working out? There's a cultural message about getting over your grief and moving on. Moving on. You can't just move on. Like, you can keep living because you're here. I think that's true. I don't think you can really get over it if you lose someone you really, really love. I think it's better to think of grief as something that you're just going to be dealing with your whole life, the whole time. Now, you'll go through different phases of it. It's going to hurt a lot in the initial part of the loss, and it's going to take a while, depending on how strong that relationship was, how present in your life that person was. Different things will trigger the missing of your person, whether it is someone that you lived with, so they would have been a part of your daily lives. There's going to be a lot of things in your immediate environment that are going to remind you of that person. So a lot of people will try to avoid their grief. That seems to be a pretty common expectation. I know that I have felt that way in the past, and I've learned through some regrets that I wish I had paid more attention to my grief at different points in my life. One of my first major deaths was when I was 11 years old. My mom, who birthed me into this life, passed away. She's this one right here. It was 1991, so it's been, as of this year, it's been 30 years, which is wild. At the time, I did not live with her. Her and my dad had gotten divorced when I was around 2. What I experienced with my mom is, being so young, I had an idea of what people wanted me to feel. I've always been someone who can kind of read the room, pick up on the emotional undercurrents of a situation or emotional expectations, especially of people that I really care about, like, say, my dad or my stepmom. So in the wake of losing my mom, it's not that they wanted me to get over it, but I could tell that they wanted me to be okay. So I took on this role of making myself okay. So I could talk to my dad and I could talk to my stepmom about losing my mom and about death in general. So in the house, it was not a taboo topic to discuss. But I was 11. I was in 5th grade. And when I went to school after she passed away, there was no one that I could talk to about it. So again, I got the message from society that they needed me to be okay and they needed me to not talk about it. So I didn't. I talked about it a little bit here and there. Sometimes a question would crop up. My dad would offer me a little more as I got older and older. But I will say, because of my initial read of the situation, especially from society, I was I need to just let this go. So by trying to move on, trying to let go, I find what I did was I ended up letting go of remembering. I think I thought that dwelling on her memory was not a good thing, like it was not what I was supposed to be doing. It was only going to make me sad. And I think that's pretty common. I think that's a pretty common thought to have. And I'm not mad at myself. I do wish I'd done it different, but I can't change that. Can't change it. Not with my mom. What I can do is, having learned this, I can pay it forward to other relationships in my life and other losses that I experience. If we fast forward to 2008, that's when my grandfather Quincy passed away. So when my grandpa passed away, I would have been, I think I was 28 at the time. And he was like, I had lived with him and my grandma, this grandma, from 2 to 6. So even though they were my grandparents, they were also parents for me. I've had 5. He was in his late 70s, and it was kind of anticipated. Like with my mom, it was very sudden. She was 34. Like that's really not very long. It took me a while to understand. You know, when you're a kid, anything over 30 just seems like old. When my grandpa passed away, I had tried a little harder to connect with him. And I think what happened when he passed away, it was my first major loss since my mother. So by this point, it had been 16 years since my mom had passed away. I think it reopened the mom stuff. Like, I was feeling grief about grandpa, but I also was starting to tap back into the grief with my mom, and having not really addressed it and just getting over it, thinking it was gone. That was foolish. That was foolish, Holly. It's never gone. That's the thing. It's never gone. If it was really love, it's never gone. So I got the opportunity to kind of reset my relationship with grief and loss and death at that point. I had the opportunity to talk with my grandpa, since we knew he wasn't well. We knew that things were going kind of a certain direction towards death. We didn't know when, but we actually were living in the knowledge of that, and so it gave grandpa and I an opportunity to have a couple of conversations that I never got to have with my mom. Having a chance to say some of the things that we would regret not saying. We would regret not expressing to one another. And I think there's something tremendously healing about that. I didn't know to do that. I had the opportunity. So it happened. And I was lucky. And he's the one who initiated it. Grandpa, he had a way of laser beaming into you whatever it is that he wanted to talk about. Sometimes a grief will bring up a whole bunch of other unresolved griefs. That's the thing, is when you experience a loss, if you have griefs you've been not attending to, it's all gonna show up 100%. So how can you do this more healthy? What can we do to intentionally create some space for grief? Well, as you can see behind me, this is one of the ways that I do that personally. When I've made this intentionally, it's not triggering in a negative way. It's triggering in a positive way. I'm keeping them in my view. I'm not stuffing them in a closet or hiding them under my bed, which is what I did with this picture for a very long time. But from what I learned about losing my mom and not attending to that grief, and subsequently forgetting a lot of things about her, I didn't want to do that again. So what you see here is my way of actually remembering my people. It's not like I sit here and I look at this every day. I pass by it every day. I have a bunch of things here that remind me of the people that I have loved and lost. And I think that's actually a really healthy thing. I do think like this can be painful sometimes. It can be painful at first, especially. It may feel like you're just torturing yourself on purpose. But I think it's about how you progress through that. I think a lot of people will hit that pain point of the loss and shy away. And the thing with death is everything is on the other side with it. The only way out is through. You can't stop and retreat with death. That's not how death works. It's not how grief works. You have to push through that feeling to get to the other side of it and understand it from a different angle. If you can sit in that feeling of loss, the painful part, and inquire. You have to inquire about, like, why does this hurt? What about this is so painful? And I think a lot of us skip that step because we just assume that what makes it painful is that they're gone. And that's true. That is what makes it painful, but why is that painful? It's because of the love. Where there is grief, there is love. You know, they can't be here forever. But the love that they gave you, that experience of things, like I'm having flashes in my mind right now of some of these people and moments that we had where I knew that I was just loved, you know, unconditionally. And that is the gift of grief. That pain and that sorrow will always lead you right back to why it's there, which is love. It's because they loved you and you loved them. And that is worth remembering. That will give you strength. That never goes away. That's always in here. And I carry these people with me everywhere I go. Even this mug. This mug was my grandma's. You know? Like, I've embraced this process in every way. It's like I can look everywhere and there's something that reminds me of someone that I've loved and someone who loved me. It's not sad. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. It makes me happy now that I've done this a lot. When I look at these people, it makes me happy. It makes me remember the love first. I don't remember the sad part. I just remember the good stuff. But you have to practice it in order to get to that point. It's not like it just instantly comes. And of course, I was devastated after many of these people passed away. But that's not how I feel now. So just keep moving through that grief, not moving on, moving through your grief. Take care of yourself, address your griefs, face them, hold them, feel them, and remember that on the other side of that grief is the love. The part you want to remember, the part they left for you. They've invested time in you, they've invested themselves in you. Honor that. Remember it. Embrace it. Bring it into your life. It's gonna make you feel great compared to not addressing it at all. I will keep posting things on this. Please, if you've enjoyed this, hit that like, add a comment if you want about your own experiences with grief or what holds you back in your grief. Talk about your relationship with death. Tell me if this has been helpful. Tell me if you have your own space like this where you honor your own grief. Peace, love, and good grief.